It's Lisa again from Been There Got Out, and we're going to try again to get mediator, CUNY law professor Joy Rosenthal. This is her first Instagram live, even though she's done her own live videos. So there she is. Okay, great, Joy. Perfect. So I'm invited to be on in a second. Like I said, found Joy, and we just met briefly. You did it. We just met briefly a few weeks ago, and I was like, we have to have her on here because she has the secret to what a lot of us need. It's just, how do I mediate with a really difficult person? So Joy, can you tell us a little bit, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, which makes you so amazing as a mediator?
Well, thank you, and hopefully that was the hard part. So let's see, I went to law school because I was working with teenagers who were involved. I never thought they would, but they...
Oh no, we are losing the volume. Oh wait, say it again. Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know.
Can you hear me?
For a sec. Go ahead.
What's happening is the in the way. Okay, let's see if
that's better for now. Okay, so start all over. So tell us a little bit about your background.
I went to law school because I was doing literacy work with teenagers, and I realized they all needed lawyers. And then I did all kinds of things in law school that had to do with families and family law. And when I got out, I worked at the Legal Aid Society in the Bronx representing kids in foster care. And so I did that for about 10 years. And I noticed that the kids were very loyal to both their parents and their foster parents. And I also realized that when there were custody situations, the kids tended to be very loyal to both of their parents.
Okay, wait, sorry. Joy, pause for 1 second. Someone said it's going in and out, and I don't know if it's going in and out still. It's going a little bit in and out on my screen too. It's like freezing, and now it's frozen.
And now it's
camera's still a little frozen. All right. Do you want, you know what? I'm seeing you pixelated. Oh, okay, now I'm seeing it's fine. It's better now. Okay. All right. So let's start all over. Or not all over, but okay. So you're talking about background with teenagers, loyalty.
So, yeah. So I spent the first 10 years or so of my legal career representing children and teenagers in foster care. And I realized that they were very loyal to their parents and their foster parents, if that was the situation, or to both parents, if it was a custody case. And kids really just wanted everybody to get along. They just didn't want to be in the middle of the battle. They wanted to live their lives and be happy and not be stressed out all the time and not be involved in court. So when I decided to go out on my own, I was very interested in mediation and collaborative law, which is sort of a variation of mediation, which we'll talk about. And I started doing divorce mediation. And the biggest difference between me and the other divorce mediators was that most of them had been divorce attorneys. And when you're in law school, we're taught to be zealous advocates for our clients, which in some situations, like domestic violence, it's really important for people to have a really good advocate. But in situations where people get along, and in family law, I think that it's also really important to preserve the relationship between the parents as much as possible. And I realized that the best way to help kids in divorce situation was to help parents at least create a model for how they could solve problems together going forward. Because as a lawyer, I say to my clients sometimes, like, I'm a very important person in your life for a very short amount of time. But you're going to forget my name. You're going to forget the other lawyer's name. You're going to, like, the kids are hopefully going to forget all of this stuff. But you're going to be with each other. You're going to have to somehow, like, co-parent with this person that's driving you crazy, and how are you going to do that? So I kind of see that we're setting things up for the future. So all of this is a long
No,
answer to your
I like long
question.
answers.
But
I was going to go ahead.
and so I've been mediating and doing collaborative law since 2006, and teaching at CUNY Law School. I teach family law at CUNY Law School. I've been doing that since 2019. So I think this is my 5th or 6th time teaching, semester teaching. And then I also started an online course called Landing on Your Feet, A Compassionate Lawyer's Guide to Divorce. So hopefully we'll
Yeah,
get to a
definitely.
little bit of all.
Okay, and I think what makes you unique also is, like you said, you have a background in really working with kids and teenagers, so it seems like you understand some of the psychology of kids, especially involved in these situations. I know you said that you like to sort of help foster the relationship between the parents, the parties, mediating, but you know, our audience tends to be dealing with really difficult personalities. So I was going to say, how do you deal with it? Let's say if domestic violence is present, because the people watching this, probably most of these situations, domestic violence is present. And so how do you even begin to start in those with fostering relationships when there's such a power imbalance in the relationship?
Well, there's a couple of things. So first of all, I do screen for domestic violence. So almost everything I do in the way I mediate is with both people together. The one thing that's separate is that I have a screening tool. It's a client information sheet, I call it. And in there, I'm asking a lot of questions about how were problems resolved in the relationship, what did they do when they had arguments, like how did they end? Has your spouse ever prevented you from seeing family members? Have they, like, I'm trying to get at different ways that the spouse might have exerted control, not just physical violence, but I do also ask about physical violence and substance abuse. And people are pretty honest in those situations. There is I don't want to say a split, but there's different ways of thinking about it, about domestic violence within the mediation community. So some people say, if there's domestic violence, we absolutely can't mediate because of the imbalance of power. Other people say, here, and I know this is a stereotype, but it usually is, right? A man abusing a woman. So I'll just use that because it's easier, but shorthand. But of course, we know that there's same-sex domestic violence. There's domestic violence going the other way in heterosexual relationships. But I'll just say, in this case, a man is the victimizer and the woman is the survivor. No,
okay, so I would say, so you were saying
that if the woman is being abused, to take away the possibility of mediation is almost abusive in itself. Maybe that's too strong a word, but the whole point of mediation is it's really based on a concept of self-determination. And so there's a lot of times when women who are in an abusive situation, they want to get out, and they want to get out as peacefully as possible. We all know that's the most dangerous time for them, right? When things are shifting. And so mediation might be a wonderful alternative for them. And sometimes, honestly, when I've been representing people, I will say to them, just get out. Like, your safety, your children's safety is the most important thing. And so it's not worth fighting over the television set. You can get another television set. You can't get another you. Right? So I do screen for it. I'm aware of it. It's different now because we're on Zoom before COVID. I was meeting with people in person, and then we had to do safety planning to make sure that she was going to be safe when she left the building. We would always have him leave first. There were times when I had to do safety planning for myself, so I never met with clients for the first time alone, unless I really knew them and felt really safe with them. I always made sure there were other people in the office.
I was going to say, you screening for domestic violence as a mediator is really unusual. I've never heard of that ever. Not in my own situation, not with hundreds of people that we deal with. So do you know if other mediators screen for domestic violence? Because this is really interesting. Really?
In New York, we do. And not everybody, but I've certainly been to trainings where, I think we all have to have domestic violence training once a year, I think, or once every 2 years. It's fairly often. It's something that first of all, I teach it. Second of all, I lived through it. And third of all, because of my experience in family court, I'm like very aware of it and very tuned in.
Yeah.
And there are times when I will fire clients because I don't feel that it's safe. It doesn't happen often.
Yeah. So one of the things you said was about in mediation, there's all different ways to do it, and I'm thinking that I wanted to get your opinion on the lawyers being present versus not present. I know I'm jumping a little bit all over the place, but I found in my own situation, and I've talked to attorneys that say in some ways it's better not to have the attorneys. You said you sometimes meet with just the parties. If there's a really good mediator, do you feel like you can manage the session better without having other people involved too who are advocating for their clients? Or does it just depend on the situation? Really?
I never meet with lawyers. I almost never meet with
okay, stay
present.
Why? Because a lot of people think that they have to have their attorneys present. And my own lawyer was like, no, do it without me there. Play sweet.
And
it worked
how did
great.
It work? Did it work?
It was great. My lawyer after was like, you just saved thousands of dollars in court by getting that parenting plan done outside. So it worked really, really well. And I felt like the mediator that we had, even though he didn't quite get it, I didn't even get what was going on at that time because it was still right at the beginning of the divorce process. But he was able to be a sort of authority figure where at one point my ex said, I don't think I should pay child support unless I have a really good relationship with the kids. And if we had had that conversation privately, it would have been hours and hours and hours maybe. And the mediator just shut it down. He said, no, the judge would never go for that. So let's figure out a number and move on. So that was really helpful. And I don't know what would have happened if lawyers were present. I think it would have been more time spent spinning wheels about amounts, but we just plowed through.
Yeah, I think that's true. Certainly in just like a little legal thing, in New York, you have to pay child support whether or not you're seeing the kid, and you're entitled to visitation whether or not you're paying child support. So they're definitely separate issues in New York. I think that, yes, you're right. Sometimes it's easier. In mediation, the client is the conversation is between the two spouses, and they're the ones making the decisions. And it is empowering, right? That you're the one making the decisions and saying what's important about your life and your kid's life, rather than having somebody else make those decisions for you. Part of what I do as a mediator is, like yesterday, I was mediating with a couple where it's a husband and wife, and the husband is just used to talking all the time and being heard, and the wife is very quiet. And I spent extra time with her, drawing her out. And when he would interrupt, I would say to him, wait a minute, hold on, we're going to get to you, and I really want to hear what you're going to say. We're going to get to you. But I would spend more time with her, drawing her out and trying to understand underneath. And then what I'm also doing is sort of reframing things so that it's not in a more neutral way. And I really try to steer away from people saying, you did this, you said this, no, I didn't, yes, I did. Like, that's not, I'll explain to them in mediation, we're much more important. We're much more focused on what's going to happen, not what happened in the past, because people can get really stuck in a conflict about something that happened or didn't happen. And we're really trying to focus on, well, how are things going to be in the future?
Yeah, I'm glad, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm glad you said that, because often, this just came up a couple days ago with a client where they said, you know, we went to mediation and my ex spent all this time going on about what I did wrong and how bad this was and I caused the end of the marriage, blah, blah, blah. And I'm worried that that's going to happen again, and I'm worried that they're going to get away with it. And I was thinking about that, and I said, yeah, but the process of mediation is to move toward resolution. So if somebody comes in there and is just arguing about the past, that person's basically going against the goal of the process. So I don't think that your ex is going to look good if that happens, because it's somebody fighting, they're doing the opposite of what everyone's there for. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, judges want to get things resolved. Mediators, you know, our job is to help kind of push things along toward resolution. And blame isn't really part of it. Fault isn't a big part of it. That's a really big thing, I think, between people think she did this, therefore she should get less. It's her fault. Or he did this, therefore he should get less. That's not how the law looks at it. Certainly not in New York. But in all states now, there's no fault divorce. And unless somebody does something that's really, really horrible, it doesn't really affect their rights. It doesn't necessarily affect the distribution of assets. It doesn't affect child.
I'm glad you said that. I don't know if you saw, there was a question that said, if someone's a victim of domestic abuse, does it mean that they end up getting more because they were the victim? But you're saying not at all.
No, what they might get is a stay-away order, an order of protection. They might get to stay in the house with the kids, which is important. But they won't necessarily get more in terms of like a better.
Yeah. I mean, that's really important to know, because I think people don't realize that. Okay, now I know that one of your talents is reading people, and you said that mediation is all about reading people. So can you talk a little bit about that? You mentioned it a little here and there.
Well, and it's interesting on Zoom now, right? But so much going on whenever you're having a conversation. Like you and I are talking. So there's the words that we're responding to, right? And that people can see. But people are also, and all of you who are watching can see, right? There's how are we looking at each other? Do we seem relaxed with each other? Do we seem comfortable with each other? Does she seem to know what she's talking about? There's all of this nonverbal communication that's happening at the same time. And that comes in a lot, right? I mean, I'm watching to see if I'm mediating, say, with a woman and a man, like, does she feel comfortable with him? Does he feel comfortable with her? Do they have their backs to each other? Are they looking at each other? Are they, you know, is he writing something down every time she opens her mouth? Is she cowering? I mean, the body language is really important.
So
it tells you
how do you handle it? Like if it's not, because again, this is our people, these are not amicable mediation sessions. This is where all of that is present, where someone's writing something down, someone's interrupting all the time. There's a lot of blame and all of that. How do you handle that versus an amicable mediation?
Well, first of all, whenever I mediate, I have a large computer screen, And whenever I mediate, I'm in gallery view. So I can watch both people while one's talking, I'm also watching the other person. And when, in the old days, when we used to meet around a coffee table, a conference table, then I was also, of course, watching body language. If somebody's interrupting, as I said, I'll ask them to not interrupt. Or if somebody's dominating the conversation, I'm very sensitive to that. So I went to Smith College, which is all women.
We just visited. It's still almost all women. The town.
Yeah, but well, that's true. So but they have an exchange program with the other 4 colleges in the area. So sometimes you would have a man in the class, and whenever there was one guy in the class, he would always dominate the conversation, and the women were usually smarter, and he would come in and like sort of speak with authority, and it amazed me how often it happened. And you see it happen again and again and again in meetings, in like business meetings, where the man will just feel that sense of entitlement, and women will step back, even if they know more. Now, I'm not saying in a mediation session always, but it has to do with society and our attitudes of women and men and our assumptions about who knows what or whatever. So I'm very sensitive to watching for that. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm definitely aware of it. But there's something that you brought up that I want to get back to, if I may, about lawyers in the room. One of the ways to deal with a power imbalance and still let the parties make the decisions and be in the driver's seat is something called collaborative law. And in collaborative law, the lawyers are both trained as mediators. Each party has the lawyer in the room with them. So it's a 4-way meeting rather than a 3-way meeting. And the lawyer's job there is both to advocate for the client and to help the client reach a settlement. So I do collaborative law, and it's a way of evening the playing field a little bit and providing support to your client, but still helping them reach a settlement and not negotiating for them. So I don't negotiate for clients anymore, and I don't represent clients in court. But I do mediation and collaborative because I really believe in that self-empowerment. So I just wanted to say that because it is a good alternative. And a lot of times, if there isn't a big imbalance of power, the person who has more power will step down a little bit with the presence of attorneys.
Like another authority figure there. Yeah, I was also thinking when you were talking about dealing with the parties in these situations, how being an educator myself, how your classroom management skills come into play with managing, make sure this person gets a chance to talk and takes their turn. Yeah. Okay. So back to the thing with the kids, working with kids, how does that influence what you do as a mediator? I mean, we have a friend who's a mediator who's got a background in child psychology. And she said everything that she does when there's kids involved is always thinking about how it's going to affect the child. So all these decisions. Do you have anything like that too when you see people with kids going at it in mediation?
Yeah, I wish I had a chance to interview kids. I think I heard that podcast, and she does talk directly to the kids.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
But I have asked if they would let me talk to the kids, and so far nobody's let me do that because I don't want to pay for it. But I think it depends how old the kids are, right? So with older kids, as one of my supervisors used to say, older kids speak with their feet. Like if they don't want to, I don't care whether it's Dad's week. I don't want to go over to Dad's house. I've got something important to do at school tomorrow. I have to get up early. I'm going to stay at Mom's house. Like, The kids will make, older kids will make their own decisions. Younger kids, you know, I think part of it is in the parenting plan is trying to understand, well, with all of it, when the parents are talking, understand why they're saying what they're saying, and then bring up, well, what about the kids? What I'm really doing, and I say this is, you know how I said that in law school we're taught to be zealous advocates for our clients. I will tell people from the very beginning, my client, like what I'm looking for is what's the best for the four of you or the three of you. What's the best for all of you involved? Like that's what I'm trying to help you come to, an agreement that's going to work as good
including
as
the
possible
kids
for everybody. So
right,
especially the kids, and almost always people will say, I just want to keep the kids out of it as much as possible, or I want what's best for the kids. People will never admit if
I was going to say there's definitely people that don't really care about the kids, but yeah, they won't admit it.
Right. And I'll tell parents, like, you know, what really hurts the kids the most is if you're fighting. You know, it's not yeah, it's, I mean, I think kids will respond, but they're very sensitive to and they know what's going on with the parents, right? So I've said to them, you know, it's the fighting that can be the biggest problem, more than anything that you're fighting about.
Okay, so when someone's looking, let's talk about if someone's looking for a mediator and they don't know where to start. What are some questions to ask, or what are some good places to look?
There's a wonderful website called mediate.com that has a national directory. If they're in New York, there's a New York State Council on Divorce Mediation, and I can send you these links. If they're in the city, there's something called the Family and Divorce Mediation Council of Greater New York, which is like an impossible title, but it's a good organization. So these are websites that have directories of private mediators. So that's one place to start. Of course, there's always word of mouth, but like lawyers, I always say, you know, like the best mediator for you might not be the best mediator for me. So it is important to interview them and look at their websites and see if just kind of some of it is it instinct. Does it feel
is it like with a therapist or a lawyer where you have to feel like you have a rapport? Because I also wonder how mediators are supposed to not know either of you, right? They're not supposed to have any kind of background knowledge, or is that wrong, that they can talk to each of you individually?
I don't. Some people do. What I do when somebody contacts me is I say, give me your email address. I'll send you an email. I send them a long email that explains the process and the fees and everything, and says, please share this with your spouse. And if you both want to come forward, here's a link to where you can sign up for a free 30-minute session. Then they come to the session together.
I see. So you don't get like the one here, one there, and then someone says, oh, they don't like, that mediator doesn't like me, she's fired.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to avoid, right? That's why I meet with everybody together. I don't want them to feel like I'm doing anything behind their back. But so that's one question to ask is, do you meet with people separately, or do you meet with people with all of us together? Will I have a chance to communicate with you separately at all, if that's important to you? How long have you been mediating? Do you specialize in divorce mediation? Because sometimes people specialize in commercial mediation or something else, you know, business, which is very, very different. And I want to come back to that for a sec. Why are you mediating? Like, why do you do this? Do you also litigate? Litigators who are also mediators, sometimes they get it. And
is there a
sometimes they
benefit
don't.
to someone who
So
litigates, is it bad? Because someone who litigates as a mediator?
It's a very different mindset. So I'll tell you a quick story. When I went to one of my first mediation trainings, I was there with all these divorce lawyers, and I didn't know divorce. I knew family law, but I didn't really know divorce law. And this guy handed me his business card. I really don't remember who it was, but his business card said, "If your spouse is a louse, I'll get you the house." And I looked at him. I said, "Why are you in a mediation training?" And he said, "I needed the continuing legal education credits." So clearly he didn't know intention of mediation. And I thought to myself, I was looking at all these divorce lawyers, like they were hardcore litigators and they wanted to fight. And I said, I need to learn divorce law, but that's going to be much easier than them learning to change their attitude and learning how to be neutral and how to listen to people. So maybe I'm like showing my prejudice here, but I think that there are a lot of mediators are sort of burnt out on litigation, and they become really good mediators because they really want that peacefulness. They want quiet. They want that not quiet. That's not exactly the right word.
I was
sometimes
going to say tranquility.
Really
I don't know about that.
Yeah, right. But they want that sense of resolution and sense of helping people, and there are some litigators that also are just terrific. They're just very good listeners and very warm and very compassionate. It really has to do with how compassionate they are, I think. But if they still have a lot of like fire in their belly to fight, I would imagine that, I don't know how they are because I don't mediate with them, but I would imagine that it's harder for them to really.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that I'm hearing like one of the main qualities that a good mediator has is compassion and the ability to listen and good classroom management skills.
Yeah. Right. I love that. All
right. Yeah. So let's talk about, I know you meet with, it sounds like you meet mostly on Zoom now. And you meet with just the parties, but can you talk a little bit about the different types of mediation that maybe you don't do, but we've heard about? Shuttle, open, closed, and possible benefits, like positives and negatives, pros and cons.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you another story. I know you talk about using the legal system as a form of abuse. And I had a case that was so much like this, and I actually called a friend of mine who had done a lot of domestic violence divorces, and I asked her, I was like, have you heard about legal abuse as a thing? And she said, absolutely. So this was a case where there was a brother and a sister, and they were co-executors of their mother's estate. And the brother sued the sister and kept bringing her into court for 8 years. They didn't settle. It took them 8 years to settle their mother's estate. Meanwhile, she was taking care of the father. She was living with the father and taking care of the father. And the 2 kids were going to inherit the apartment. And he wanted to charge her rent for living in the apartment, in the parents' apartment, while she was taking care of the father. And I represented her in this case. This was not a divorce, obviously. It was between a brother and sister. So the father died, and he brought 3 lawsuits against her. And that went on and on and on and on. And it was just impossible. And it was just horrible for her. She had done so much to help her parents, and her parents loved her, and he didn't care at all. He was like a bulldozer. And it actually was in surrogate's court, and they sent us to mediation. And the mediator we had was a commercial mediator. And you know how you hear when teachers go on strike or something and they go to arbitration or they go to mediation and they're there for hours and they settle in the middle of the night. You hear it on the radio, right? Like maybe it's happening right now in Los Angeles. So those kind of mediators are doing shuttle mediation, I think, a lot, and they'll just start at 9 in the morning and go till however late it goes. So that's the kind of mediator we got. And so we said, no, we're not. I mean, I had said mediation is not always appropriate. It's not appropriate in this situation because the brother was a lawyer and he knew how to use the legal system, and he had this high-powered law firm, and she had me, who was a solo practitioner, and I didn't have the resources that they had and all this stuff. But this time we agreed to go to mediation. I think we were ordered by the judge to go to mediation. So we go in there at 10 o'clock. We met from 10 o'clock till 7 one day, and then from 10 till 10 in the night the next day. She was like literally climbing up the walls. Like it was horrible. She was doing yoga. Like when the mediator would go to the other side, she was like doing yoga to like calm herself down. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. And it's one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my legal career was having her sign an agreement, because it was an abusive agreement. It was done under abusive circumstances. The mediator was putting so much pressure on us to sign because he wanted a win. He wanted to get this over with. I was putting pressure on her to agree to things simply because of what I said before. Like I just wanted her to get out. I didn't want her to go to trial. I thought it would be really difficult for her to stand trial. And it was a terrible, terrible situation. And they ended up signing an agreement, and then we litigated. We actually went to the appellate division about that. I mean, we litigated more and more and more. It lasted a long time. So I definitely believe that people, one, are using the legal system as a form of abuse. Two, it taught me that there's a huge difference between commercial mediation and family mediation. And I really think when I mediate, and most divorce mediators I know, when we mediate, it's for 2 hours at a time. Because you just get exhausted after that. You get emotionally and physically exhausted. These are the most sensitive things that we're talking about, the most personal things, that all kinds of stuff comes up. And it can be very triggering. So I really think it's important to do it in chunks that are manageable for everybody, to check in with people, see how they're doing, and to take breaks when they need to. And you know, like I said, my style is to keep everybody in the room and not do that shuttle stuff, because I found the shuttle stuff to be very manipulative. And in some ways it was more for the mediator to be able to say, I settled the case. That was my experience of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you just talked about, one of the things we tell our clients all the time is how they do need to learn to advocate for themselves, sometimes even with their own attorney, and that everyone's goal in mediation and everywhere is to get you guys to settle. So ahead of mediation, there's preparation that they need to think about some things seriously, so it's not just under duress that they make a decision because people are tired or somebody wants to finish it. And I'm glad you mentioned the 2 hour chunk thing too. Our friend had said the same thing because of the reasons you said. But I think people also tend to believe that when you go to mediation once, it's supposed to be done. But I know in my own situation, like it's like sessions. We used to go once a week for a 2 hour session, and it was like a slow, non-exhausting process. And then we finally figured it out. But I think people think, oh, if I don't get it done, then it's a waste of time. Like I went once, it didn't work out, so forget it. It's never going to work. So I was going to say, do you have tips or suggestions for people who are wary of the mediation process, especially where domestic violence is involved, where, all right, I already tried it, we didn't get anywhere, like anything you can tell people who have done it once or just don't even want to try it?
Well, I think, first of all, safety is the most important thing. So if you feel that mediating would make you less safe, then you might be right, and you might need to listen to that. But you're balancing whatever the mediation experience is with self-determination. Who's making the decisions? Why would a stranger who doesn't care about you and has many other things to do, why would they
like
make
a judge
better decisions than you do, right?
That's what we're talking about.
Like a judge. And yeah, that is what I'm talking about. And I mean, I think that everybody wants somebody to hear their story. They want somebody to understand how much pain they're in. But a judge is not equipped to do that very well. That's not what they're trained in. They're not trained in empathy. They're not trained they're trained in the law. And they're not going to make a decision from their heart. They're going to make a decision from their head. And it's very different. So, isn't for everybody. If you are willing to try it, I would say go once, see how you feel about the mediator. What you really want to know is the mediator able to listen to you? And a good mediator will reframe what you're saying, will repeat back to you to check in with you to make sure that they heard you right, that they understand why you're saying what you're saying. And the big advantage of mediation is that it's one of the few things in life, I think, that's better for you. And you can have more creativity in your outcome. You know, in your agreement, you can have a lot more creativity. You can figure out when you're going to modify something. So if something's working now, but you can put in like little provisions so that when are we going to look at this again and change it? There's all kinds of things you can do with a mediated agreement. It's cheaper and it's better. So if you can do it, it's definitely worth trying. Or if you really if you feel like the imbalance of power is too great, then maybe consider a collaborative divorce, collaborative law, where you'll have more support in the room, but also still come to an agreement that the two of you.
Why do you think judges order mediation all the time? I mean, I know why, but let's hear it from a mediator. Why are they always saying go to mediation first, don't come to trial?
Because they have enough work to do. Trials are incredibly expensive and incredibly demanding physically, financially, emotionally. And I think, especially when there's kids, they really want the parents to be able to work it out because they know that they're going to have other things come up after this, In New York, a few years ago, they came out with we call it presumptive ADR. It's presumed that any civil case that's brought in New York is presumed to have alternative dispute resolution, which is ADR, or mediation will be appropriate unless proven otherwise. So in some states, mediation is mandatory for any divorce.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, you just taught me something new. I'm going to mention that in the caption. Presumptive ADR. And that stands again for, what is it again? Alternative dispute resolution.
Dispute
resolution. All right.
Yeah. Or as one of my trainers called it, appropriate dispute resolution.
Yeah. All right. So, Joy, how can people find you? I know you're going to be back on here talking about the divorce course a little bit later, but how can people find you now if they want to use you as a mediator or get more information?
Well, my Instagram handle is @JoyMediator. So you can find me there and DM me. That's probably the easiest. If you, my website is joyrosenthal.com, and you can contact me through there. Those are the easiest. I'm also on Facebook. But
great.
Yeah, @JoyMediator.
All right. Well, thanks, Joy. I don't know if there's anything else that we missed, but this has been really helpful.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
so we'll catch up soon. Thanks, Joy.
Thanks so
Bye.
much. Okay. All right. Take care.